If you're a physician, you probably heard the term RVUs thrown around in contracts, compensation, or performance reviews. But no one ever really explains how they work and why they matter. And that's the problem, because RVUs directly impact how much you get paid, how you're evaluated, and whether your compensation is actually fair. In this video, we're going to break down RVUs in plain English, what they are, how they're calculated, and how you use them to your advantage instead of being confused or underpaid by them. So let's start simple. What is an RVU? RVU stands for Relative Value Unit. It's basically a standardized way to measure physicians' work and productivity. Each visit, every procedure, every CPT code has an RVU assigned to it. The more complex the service, the more RVUs it's worth. Hospitals, medical groups, and even insurances use RVUs because this is where things get important. RVUs isn't just a number, it's made up of three parts. First, you have a work RVUs or WRVUs. This reflects your time, your training, your skill, the mental effort, and the complexity of the care that you're providing. This is the part that's tied directly to you as the physician. The second one is practice expense RVUs. This is going to cover your overhead. Things like staff, equipment, supplies, rent, and operational costs. Third is malpractice RVUs. This accounts for the liability risk associated with different services. Higher risk specialties typically have higher malpractice RVUs. Now here's the key takeaway. When you're evaluating your compensation, especially if you're on a productivity model, you should primarily focus on your work RVUs, because most physician compensation formulas focus on work RVUs and not total RVUs. And if you don't know which one your contract's using, you could be misunderstanding how your pay is calculated. So go and double check this in your contract if you don't know. Now, let's talk about how RVUs affect your pay, because this is where things get real. There are a few different kinds of compensation models, as you'll see. First, you have base salary plus RVU bonus. You're guaranteed a base income, and once you hit a certain RVU threshold, you can earn a bonus for additional productivity. Second is pure RVU-based compensation. Your compensation model is directly tied to how many work RVUs you generate. No base cushion. Your productivity determines your income. Now here's the key formula you need to understand. You have RVUs multiplied by a dollar amount, which is called the conversion factor, is going to equal your pay. So if you generate 6,000 work RVUs and your contract pays you $50 per work RVU, then you're going to get $300,000. But here's what many physicians miss. Two doctors can generate the same amount of RVUs and earn completely different income. Why? Because conversion factors can vary. One employer might pay $42 per RVU, and another might pay $58 per RVU. That difference alone can mean a difference of tens of thousands of dollars. And then there could be threshold caps. Some contracts require you to hit a minimum RVU number before bonuses even start. Others can cap you at how much you can earn, meaning after a certain point, the extra work does not equal extra pay. So you might think you're on a productivity model, but if there's a cap, then you're not truly unlimited. And that's why understanding your RVU structure is so crucial. Not just how many you produce, but how they're being valued. And this is exactly why it's so important to have a healthcare attorney look over your contract. You need to fully understand how you're getting paid. What RVU number is being used? Total RVUs or work RVUs? Is there a threshold before your bonuses start? Is there a cap limiting your earning potential? And what's your conversion factor? Because once you sign that contract, you are locked into that structure. And I've seen physicians leave tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table because of this. And here's something many doctors don't realize. RVU terms are often negotiable. Your conversion factor, your threshold, even how productivity is structured. So do not gloss over this section. And have your healthcare attorney look over it before you sign. Now let's talk about the most common RVU mistakes that physicians can make. Because understanding RVUs is just one thing, but using them strategically is another. First, not knowing your RVU targets. If your contract says you need to hit 6,500 work RVUs, you should know exactly where you stand every single month. Too many physicians don't know their target until the end of the year, and by then it's too late. Second, not understanding which codes generate higher RVUs. Not all visits are valued the same. If you're constantly undercoding or not aware of how certain services are weighted, you might be working harder without actually being compensated accurately. Number 3, assuming volume equals fair pay. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're paid fairly. If your conversion factor is low, or if there's a cap in place, more patients doesn't automatically mean more income. Fourth, poor documentation leads to lost RVUs. If it's not documented correctly, it doesn't count. Incomplete documentation can result into downcoding, which directly lowers your RVUs and your pay. And finally, and this is huge, not tracking your RVUs independently. You should never rely solely on your employer's numbers. Track your own RVUs. Know your trends. Know your averages. Because when you understand your data, that is leverage. Now, let's talk about how to increase your RVUs ethically. Because it's not necessarily about seeing more patients. And it's definitely not about upcoding. It's about accuracy. First, better documentation. Not longer notes, not fluff, but clear, complete documentation that supports the level of care that you're already providing. Second, truly understanding coding levels. If you don't know the difference between a level 3 or a level 4 visit, you could be leaving legitimate RVs on the table. Third, capture billable work, prolonged services, procedures. If it's billable and appropriate, it should be captured. Fourth, reviewing denial patterns. If certain codes are consistently getting denied or downcoded, it's lost productivity and lost income. And finally, working smarter with workflows and support staff. When your team helped gather histories, update meds, prep charts, and streamline processes, you can document accurately and code appropriately without burning out. Also, look into using AI to help you document during your appointments. Remember, it isn't about doing more. It's about getting credit for the work you're already doing. Now, let's talk about RVUs and contract negotiations. If RVUs are part of your compensation, they should absolutely be discussed in detail before you sign. Don't just look at your salary number. Understand the structure behind it. Here are questions you should be asking. What's the conversion factor? Are there caps on your earnings? Is there a minimum threshold before you start getting bonused? What is the historical RVU performance for someone in this role? And how are RVUs tracked and reported to you? Because if you don't know how productivity is measured, you can't evaluate whether the offer is truly competitive. And here's the truth. RVUs can work in your favor. That's why a lot of doctors end up doing all RVU-based models. If you're efficient, well-supported, and fairly valued, a strong RVU model can significantly increase your income. But if the conversion factor is low and the thresholds are unrealistic or the support isn't there, RVUs can quietly limit your earning potential. So don't treat this as a small detail in your contract. It's one of the most important financial compensations of your career. Now, one important distinction. RVUs are primarily an employed physician metrics. Hospitals and large groups use RVUs to measure productivity and determine compensation. But in private practices, the focus shifts. Revenue, collections, overhead, and profitability matter far more than RVUs alone. In private practice, you're not just a productivity unit, you're a business owner. That said, understanding RVUs is still valuable. They help you benchmark productivity. They help you evaluate buy-ins or acquisitions, and they help you compare employed opportunity versus the private practice model. So even if you own a private practice someday, you still need to understand how RVUs work because they affect how you negotiate today. RVUs don't have to be confusing, but ignoring them is going to cost you a lot over time. Like we said, RVUs play a major role in how hospital-employed physicians are evaluated and paid. But once you start looking at private practices, the conversion shifts from RVUs to profit margins, revenue, control, and ownership. So if you're trying to decide the path to what makes the most sense for you, you need to understand both sides. And if this interests you, check out my next video on private practices versus hospital employment. We break down the real differences in compensation, workload, autonomy, and the long-term upside. So you can see exactly where RVUs fit into this picture. See you in the next video.